My name is Drake Torrin, and I should have known something was wrong when my wife started caring about her appearance again. Not that Elara had ever been sloppy, mind you, but when a woman who used to roll out of bed in yesterday's clothes suddenly starts getting up an hour early to perfect her makeup routine, well, that's what we call a clue. I run a boat repair business down at Clearwater Marina, which means I'm up before dawn most days, coffee in one hand, wrench in the other. It's honest work, the kind that leaves grease under your fingernails and satisfaction in your chest. Elara works in human resources for some tech company downtown, the kind of place where they have kombucha on tap and everyone pretends to love their job. We've been married 6 years, together for 8, and I thought I knew her patterns better than the tide schedules I keep pinned to my workshop wall. But lately, those patterns had been shifting like sand. "Working late again tonight," she announced over breakfast, not looking up from her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen with the intensity of a concert pianist hitting a difficult passage. "Third time this week," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Big project?" She hummed, which wasn't really an answer. She was wearing a new perfume, something floral and expensive that made our kitchen smell like a fancy hotel lobby. When I'd asked about it last week, she'd said it was a gift from her work friend Marina. Generous friend, I'd thought at the time. "What time should I expect you?" "Not sure. Don't wait up." She finally looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, excitement. It was gone before I could pin it down. After she left, I stood in our kitchen drinking my second cup of coffee and staring out the window at Mrs. Greeley's garden next door. The old woman was already out there with her watering can, tending to her roses with the dedication of a museum curator. She caught sight of me through the window and waved. I waved back. Mrs. Greeley had lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. She knew everyone's business, often before they knew it themselves. She was also the kind of neighbor who noticed things, important things. I grabbed my keys and headed for the marina, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut like bad seafood. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes you remember why you chose to live near the water. The drive took me through downtown, past Elara's office building with its wall of glass windows that reflected the sky like a mirror. Mick was already at the marina when I arrived, bent over the engine of a 30-foot cabin cruiser that had been giving us trouble all week. Mick Rodriguez had been my foreman for 3 years, ever since he'd moved up from Florida after his divorce. He was the kind of guy who could fix anything with moving parts and had a joke for every occasion, most of them inappropriate. "Morning, boss," he called out without looking up. "This engine's being more stubborn than my ex-wife's lawyer." "What's the diagnosis?" "Fuel pump's shot, and the carburetor's seen better decades. Owner's not going to be happy about the estimate." I grabbed my coveralls from the hook by the office door and got to work. There's something therapeutic about mechanical problems. They have solutions. You can take them apart, identify what's broken, fix it, and put it back together. If only relationships worked the same way. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Elara. "Lunch meeting ran long. Probably won't make it home for dinner either. Sorry." I stared at the message, noting the exclamation point. Elara wasn't an exclamation point kind of person. She was more of a period person, sometimes a semicolon when she was feeling fancy. But exclamation points? Those were new. "Everything okay?" Mick had noticed me staring at my phone. "Yeah, just Elara working late again. She's been putting in some serious hours lately. That promotion must be important to her." I nodded, but something nagged at me. Elara hadn't mentioned a promotion. In fact, she'd been complaining about her job more than usual lately, talking about how boring it was, how unchallenging. People don't usually work overtime for jobs they find boring. The afternoon crawled by. I threw myself into the work, replacing the fuel pump on the cabin cruiser and starting on the carburetor rebuild. Physical labor has always been my way of thinking through problems, and right now, I had a problem I couldn't quite name. By 5 o'clock, most of the marina had emptied out. The weekend sailors had taken their boats out for evening cruises, and the weekday crowd had headed home to their families. I was cleaning up my tools when Mrs. Greeley appeared at the entrance to the workshop. "Drake, dear, I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Not at all, Mrs. Greeley. What brings you down to the marina?" She hesitated, wringing her hands in a way that made my stomach tighten. "I was at the Seaside Inn yesterday afternoon, having lunch with my sister. You know the place, don't you? That nice restaurant overlooking the harbor?" I nodded. The Seaside Inn was upscale, the kind of place where they gave you 3 different forks and the waiters wore ties. Not exactly Elara's usual lunch spot, but maybe work meetings were different. Well, I couldn't help but notice Elara there. She was having lunch with a young man. Very handsome, well-dressed. I thought perhaps it was a work colleague. The way she said work colleague made it clear she had her doubts. "Did you say hello?" "Oh, no, dear. They seemed to be having such an intense conversation. I didn't want to interrupt." She paused, studying my face. "The thing is, Drake, they seemed very familiar with each other. The way they were sitting, leaning in close, her hand on his arm. It reminded me of how you and Elara used to look when you were first dating." The wrench I was holding suddenly felt very heavy in my hand. "What time was this?" "Around 2 o'clock. I remember because my sister was complaining about how late we were eating lunch." 2 o'clock on a Thursday. Elara had texted me that morning saying she had back-to-back meetings all afternoon and wouldn't be able to talk. But the Seaside Inn was a 20-minute drive from her office, in the opposite direction from anywhere she would need to be for work. "I'm probably just being a silly old woman," Mrs. Greeley continued. "But I thought you should know. Sometimes we see things that others miss, and I'd hate for you to be the last to know if something was amiss." After she left, I sat in my workshop as the sun set over the harbor, trying to process what she'd told me. There could be innocent explanations. Maybe it was a client meeting. Maybe the hand-on-arm thing was just Mrs. Greeley's imagination. Maybe the intense conversation was about quarterly reports or employee evaluations. But deep down, in the part of my brain that had kept me alive through 38 years of life's curveballs, I knew better. The pieces were starting to fit together in a pattern I didn't want to see. The new perfume, the extra attention to appearance, the mysterious overtime, the exclamation points in her texts. My wife was having an affair. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The thought hit me like a cold wave, leaving me breathless and disoriented. I'd suspected it, somewhere in the back of my mind, but having the suspicion confirmed was different. It was like the difference between hearing about a car accident and actually seeing the twisted metal and shattered glass. I locked up the workshop and drove home through the gathering darkness, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Hire a private investigator? Pretend I didn't know and hope it would blow over? Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Elara's car was gone, of course. Working late. Again. I sat in my truck for a long moment, looking at the house we'd bought together 3 years ago. We'd been so excited about it then, planning where to put furniture, talking about maybe getting a dog, maybe starting a family. Now it just looked empty and cold, like a stage set waiting for actors who might never show up. My phone buzzed. A text from Elara. "Don't wait up. This project is taking forever. Love you. Love you." 2 words that should have made me feel better, but instead felt like a slap across the face. How do you say you love someone while you're lying to them? How do you kiss them goodnight while you're planning to betray them? I went inside and made myself a sandwich I didn't want, then sat in front of the television watching a baseball game I didn't care about. Every few minutes I found myself checking Elara's location on the Find My Friends app we'd set up years ago for practical reasons. According to her phone, she was at her office downtown, but Mrs. Greeley's words kept echoing in my head. They seemed very familiar with each other. At 10 o'clock, I made a decision that would change everything. I grabbed my keys and drove downtown. The city looked different at night. The business district, bustling during the day, had transformed into something quieter and more intimate. Streetlights cast long shadows between the buildings, and the few people on the sidewalks moved with purpose, heading to dinner or drinks or whatever it is people do when they're not sitting in their trucks, spying on their wives. Elara's office building was mostly dark, just a few scattered windows glowing in the tower of glass and steel. I parked across the street and checked the app again. Her phone was definitely here, somewhere in that building. But something felt wrong about the whole picture. I'd been to Elara's office plenty of times over the years. Christmas parties, company picnics, the occasional lunch date when I happened to be in the neighborhood. I knew which floor she worked on, and I could see it from where I sat. The entire floor was dark. Maybe she was in a conference room on a different floor. Maybe there was some kind of special project that required secrecy. Maybe I was being paranoid and suspicious and everything Mrs. Greeley had seen was perfectly innocent. Or maybe my wife was a liar. I sat there for 20 minutes, watching the building and seeing no signs of life. A few people came and went through the main entrance, but they all looked like security guards or cleaning crew, not HR executives working on mysterious projects. At 10:30, I started the truck and drove home, more confused than ever. Either Elara was telling the truth and I was losing my mind, or she was lying and I was married to a stranger. The house was still empty when I got back. I tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to do anything that would keep my brain occupied, but nothing worked. Every thought led back to the same place. My wife was somewhere else, with someone else, doing things I didn't want to imagine. She came home at 11:47. I know because I was lying in bed, wide awake, watching the clock on my nightstand. I heard her car in the driveway, heard the front door open and close, heard her footsteps on the stairs. "Drake?" she whispered as she came into the bedroom. "Are you awake?" I pretended to be asleep, listening as she moved around the room in the dark. She was trying to be quiet, but I could hear everything. The rustle of clothes being removed, the soft sound of her feet on the bathroom tiles, the whisper of sheets as she slid into bed beside me. She smelled different, not just the new perfume, but something else underneath it. Something that made my stomach clench with suspicion and anger. "Long day," I mumbled, as if she'd just woken me up. "Exhausting," she said, settling in beside me. "But we're making good progress on the project." "What kind of project keeps you out until almost midnight?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "It's complicated. Restructuring stuff. Very boring." She was lying. I could hear it in her voice, feel it in the tension of her body beside me. After 8 years together, I knew the difference between Elara telling the truth and Elara spinning a story. This was definitely a story. "Well, I'm glad you're home safe," I said, and rolled over to face away from her. "Good night, honey. Love you." There it was again. Love you. The words hung in the dark air between us like a challenge. I lay awake for hours after her breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of sleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to wake her up and demand the truth. Part of me wanted to pretend nothing was happening and hope it would all go away. But the biggest part of me, the part that had built a successful business from nothing and survived everything life had thrown at me so far, wanted answers. The next morning, Elara was up early again, spending extra time in the bathroom with her hair and makeup. She came down to breakfast, looking like she was heading to a photo shoot instead of a day at the office. "Another late night tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Probably. This project has a tight deadline." "When do you think it'll be finished?" "Hard to say. Could be weeks." Weeks. She was planning to keep this up for weeks. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and made a plan. I needed proof. Not suspicions, not hunches, not reports from well-meaning neighbors, but actual, undeniable evidence. If Elara was having an affair, I was going to find out who, when, where, and how long it had been going on, and then I was going to make her regret it. I called Mick and told him I'd be in late, then spent the morning doing research. Elara's company had a website with employee directories and project information. I couldn't find any mention of major restructuring or special projects that would require the kind of hours she'd been putting in. I also couldn't find any mention of late-night meetings or weekend work sessions. In fact, according to their latest newsletter, the company was proud of its work-life balance initiatives and family-friendly policies. At noon, I drove to her office building and parked in the visitor's lot. I didn't have a plan beyond watching and waiting, but sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the truth reveals itself if you're patient enough to see it. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:15, Elara emerged from the building with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. They walked close together, his hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was definitely not professional. They got into his car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in a year, and drove away. I followed at a distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. They went to Rosario's, an Italian place on the other side of town. Upscale but not too fancy, the kind of restaurant where you could have an intimate conversation without being overheard. I parked across the street and watched them through the window. They sat at a corner table, leaning in close, talking and laughing like old friends. Or like lovers. She touched his hand. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. They shared a piece of tiramisu, feeding each other bites with the kind of playful intimacy that made me want to put my fist through the windshield. I took pictures with my phone, dozens of them, documenting every smile, every touch, every moment of betrayal. The man was handsome in a generic way, like a stock photo model or a soap opera actor. He had perfect teeth and perfectly styled hair, and probably drove his perfectly maintained BMW to his perfectly decorated apartment, where he was currently ruining my perfectly normal life. They stayed at the restaurant for 2 hours. When they finally left, they didn't go back to Elara's office. Instead, they drove to a hotel downtown, the Meridian, one of those boutique places with mood lighting and overpriced cocktails. I sat in the parking garage, watching the elevator numbers light up as they rose to whatever floor held whatever room where my wife was about to do whatever she was about to do with whoever this guy was. My phone rang. It was Elara. "Hi, honey," she said, and her voice sounded slightly breathless. "Just wanted to let you know I'm grabbing lunch with Marina from work. We're talking about the project." "Marina," I repeated. "Yes, you remember Marina. I've mentioned her before." The man in the BMW was definitely not Marina, unless Marina had undergone some very dramatic changes since the last time Elara had described her. "Have fun," I said. "Thanks. I should be back at the office in an hour or so. Love you." She hung up, and I sat there in the parking garage, surrounded by concrete and shadows, listening to the echo of her lies. Love you. Right. I drove back to the marina, my mind spinning with plans and possibilities. Mick took one look at my face and wisely decided not to ask questions. I threw myself into work, rebuilding carburetors and replacing fuel lines with the kind of focused intensity that usually meant I was working through a problem. The problem was this. My wife was cheating on me with some pretty boy in a BMW, and she was lying about it with the casual ease of someone who'd had plenty of practice. The question was what I was going to do about it. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to more lies and denials. I could file for divorce, but that would be expensive and messy and would probably end with her getting half of everything I'd worked for. Or I could be smart about it, patient, strategic. I could make her pay for what she was doing to me, to us, to the life we'd built together. Not with violence or threats or anything that would land me in legal trouble, but with the kind of calculated, methodical revenge that would leave her wishing she'd never heard the name Drake Torrin. By the time I locked up the workshop that evening, I had the beginnings of a plan. The next few days fell into a pattern. Elara would announce she was working late. I would express appropriate concern about her long hours, and then I would follow her to see where she was really going. It was like being a private investigator in my own marriage, except the case was personal and the stakes were everything I'd built over the past 8 years. Her boyfriend's name was Tristan Vale. I found that out by following them to a coffee shop where he paid with a credit card, giving me a clear view of his name when he signed the receipt. A little internet research told me he was a sales representative for a software company, 29 years old, graduated from some expensive private college, and based on his social media profiles, exactly the kind of guy who thought he was God's gift to the world. His Instagram was a masterpiece of narcissism. Gym selfies, pictures of expensive meals, shots of him in various exotic locations with captions like, "Living my best life," and "blessed and grateful." He had the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial, and the kind of lifestyle that suggested either family money or very good luck in the commission department. What he didn't have, apparently, was any sense of discretion. His location settings were public, which meant I could track his movements almost as easily as I could track Elara's. It was like watching a real-time documentary about my wife's affair. They met 3 times that week. Lunch at different restaurants around the city, always somewhere far from Elara's office, always somewhere they could sit close together and whisper like teenagers planning to skip school. On Thursday, they went back to the Meridian Hotel. On Friday, they drove to his apartment, a high-rise downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of view that cost extra. I documented everything: photos, times, locations, license plate numbers. I felt like I was building a case, which I suppose I was. Not for a courtroom, but for something more personal. The hardest part was going home every night and pretending everything was normal. Elara would come in with her stories about late meetings and difficult projects, and I would nod and ask appropriate questions, while inside I was screaming. She was getting better at the lies, more creative with the details. She'd started bringing home paperwork to make her stories more convincing, spreading files across the kitchen table and sighing dramatically about deadlines and budgets. "I'm sorry I've been so distracted lately," she said on Friday night, looking up from a stack of papers that I was pretty sure she'd grabbed randomly from her desk. "This project is just consuming everything." "Don't worry about it," I said. "I understand work pressure. I know you do. That's why I love you. You're so supportive." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and for a moment I almost believed her. Almost forgot about Tristan Vale and his BMW and his perfect teeth. Almost convinced myself that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Then I remembered the way she'd laughed at something he'd said over lunch, throwing her head back in delight, more animated than I'd seen her in months. She was happy with him in a way she hadn't been happy with me in a long time, and that hurt worse than the lying. Saturday morning, Elara announced she had to go into the office to catch up on some things. "I'll probably be there most of the day," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Don't wait around for me." I waited exactly 1 hour after she left, then drove to Tristan's apartment building. Her car was in the visitor parking area, tucked between a Tesla and a Porsche like she belonged there. I sat in my truck, looking up at the building and wondering which window was his, wondering what they were doing up there, wondering how long this had been going on and how I'd been so blind to it. My phone rang. Mrs. Greeley. "Drake, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "Well, it's probably nothing, but I was at the grocery store this morning and I ran into Janet Morrison. You know Janet? She works at that hotel downtown, the Meridian." My stomach clenched. "Yeah, I know Janet." She mentioned seeing Elara there several times recently, with a young man. Janet thought maybe you two were having marriage counseling or something, but she said they didn't look like they were in therapy, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what she meant. Janet's a sweet girl, but she does talk. I thought you should know in case anyone else mentions it to you. After she hung up, I sat there realizing that my wife's affair was becoming public knowledge. Hotel staff were noticing them. Neighbors were talking. It was only a matter of time before someone said something directly to me, probably in front of other people, and I would have to choose between pretending I didn't know or admitting that my wife was making a fool of me. That's when I decided it was time to stop gathering intelligence and start using it. Sunday dinner at Elara's parents' house was a monthly tradition. Her mother, Patricia, was one of those women who believed that family meals could solve any problem, and her father, Robert, was the kind of man who asked pointed questions about my business and offered unsolicited advice about investments. Her younger brother, Kevin, usually showed up with whatever girlfriend he was dating that month and spent the evening trying to impress everyone with stories about his job in marketing. They were good people, basically. A little pretentious, maybe, and definitely more concerned with appearances than I was comfortable with. But they'd always treated me fairly. When Elara and I had gotten married, they'd welcomed me into the family without reservation. When I'd started the marina business, Robert had even offered to invest, though I'd politely declined. They deserved to know what their daughter was doing. I arrived at their house in Riverside Heights with a plan and a phone full of evidence. Elara was already there, helping her mother in the kitchen and chatting about work. She looked relaxed and happy, more like her old self than she had in weeks. "Drake!" Patricia hugged me warmly. "How are you, dear? Elara tells us you've been so understanding about her crazy work schedule." "I try to be supportive," I said, glancing at Elara. She was smiling at me with what looked like genuine affection, and for a moment I almost lost my nerve. Then I remembered Tristan Vale's hand on her back, the way she'd fed him tiramisu, the lies she'd told me every single day for weeks. Dinner was pot roast and mashed potatoes, comfort food that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this family in the first place. The conversation was light and easy. Kevin's new girlfriend was a yoga instructor, Robert was considering retirement, Patricia was planning a garden renovation. Normal family stuff that made what I was about to do feel even more necessary. "So, Elara," Robert said over dessert, "tell us about this big project you've been working on. Sounds like it's really demanding." "Oh, it's just restructuring stuff," Elara said, waving her hand dismissively. "Very boring. I don't want to put everyone to sleep talking about it." "I'd love to hear about it," I said. "You never really told me what kind of restructuring." She shot me a quick look, something flickering in her eyes. "Just departmental reorganization, moving people around, adjusting budgets, nothing exciting." "Sounds like the kind of project that would require a lot of meetings," I said. "Probably lunch meetings, right? Getting input from different stakeholders?" "Sometimes, yes. I bet you've been to some nice restaurants, all on the company expense account, I hope." The room had gone quiet. Patricia and Robert were looking back and forth between us like they were watching a tennis match. Kevin had stopped talking to his girlfriend and was paying attention to our conversation. "Drake," Elara said carefully, "what are you getting at?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos I'd taken at Rosario's. "I was just wondering if Tristan Vale is part of this restructuring project." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Elara's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally something that looked like resignation. "Who's Tristan Vale?" Patricia asked. I turned my phone around so everyone could see the screen. The photo showed Elara and Tristan at their corner table, his hand covering hers, both of them smiling intimately at each other. "He's the colleague Elara's been having lunch meetings with," I said, "and dinner meetings, and hotel meetings." Robert set down his coffee cup with a sharp clink. Elara? It's not what it looks like, she said quickly, but her voice was shaking. Really? I scrolled to another photo, this one showing them walking into the Meridian Hotel, his arm around her waist. What does it look like? Patricia made a small sound, like air being let out of a balloon. Kevin was staring at his sister with his mouth open. How long? Robert asked, his voice quiet. Dad, I can explain. How long, Elara? She looked around the table, meeting each of our eyes in turn, and I could see her calculating whether she could still lie her way out of this. But the evidence was right there on my phone, and we all knew what we were looking at. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months. While I'd been working 12-hour days to build our future, while I'd been planning a surprise trip to Hawaii for our anniversary, while I'd been lying awake at night worried about her stress levels and long hours, she'd been with him. I think I should go, I said, standing up. Drake, wait. Elara reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Enjoy your family dinner, I said. I'm sure you have a lot to discuss. I left them there, Elara crying, her parents stunned into silence, Kevin looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. As I drove home through the quiet Sunday evening streets, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The secret was out. The pretending was over. Now the real work could begin. Monday morning, Elara was gone when I woke up. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and there was no note, no text message, nothing to indicate where she'd gone or when she might be back. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the silence and planning my next move. She'd probably gone to Tristan's apartment, or maybe she was at work, trying to pretend yesterday hadn't happened. Either way, I had things to do. First stop, the bank. We had 3 joint accounts, checking, savings, and a money market account we'd been using to save for a house renovation. Nothing illegal about withdrawing money from accounts with my name on them, but I wanted to be smart about it. I took half of everything, transferred it to a new account in my name only, and left detailed documentation of every transaction. If this was heading toward divorce court, I wanted to look like the reasonable one. Next stop, our phone carrier. I'd like to remove a line from our family plan, I told the customer service representative. Which line would you like to remove? I gave her Elara's number. I see this is a shared plan. I'll need authorization from both account holders to make changes. I'm the primary account holder, I said, showing her my ID, and I'd like to remove the secondary line effective immediately. It took some discussion and a conversation with a supervisor, but eventually they agreed. Elara's phone would stop working by the end of the day. She'd have to get her own plan, her own number, her own bill. Small things, but they would send a message. The shared life we'd built was being dismantled, piece by piece. I drove to the marina feeling more focused than I had in weeks. Mick was waiting for me with coffee and a curious expression. You look different today, he said. Different how? I don't know. Like you've made a decision about something. Maybe I have. I told him everything. The affair, the lies, the confrontation at her parents' house. He listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering something unflattering about cheating spouses. So, what's the plan? He asked when I finished. I'm going to make her life complicated. Complicated how? Haven't figured that out yet. But she wants to play games. We'll play games. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Drake, it's me. Elara's voice was strained, exhausted. We need to talk. Do we? Please, I can explain everything. I'm listening. There was a long pause. Not over the phone? Can you meet me somewhere? Where? Our house. I'm here now. I considered it. Part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, what possible explanation she could offer for 3 months of lies and betrayal. But a bigger part of me was done with her words. I'd heard enough of her words. I'm working, I said, and hung up. She called back immediately. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail again. After the 5th call, I turned off my phone. Mick was watching me with an expression somewhere between admiration and concern. You sure you don't want to hear her out? What's she going to say? That it didn't mean anything? That she was confused? That she loves me and wants to work things out? Maybe. And then what? I forgive her, we go to counseling, and I spend the rest of my life wondering if she's really working late or if she's with the next Tristan Vale. Point taken. I spent the afternoon working on a boat engine, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of disassembly and diagnosis. Engines made sense. If something was broken, you could see it, fix it, test it. If it worked, you kept it. If it didn't, you replaced it. Around 4 o'clock, Mrs. Greeley appeared at the workshop entrance. She looked upset. Drake, dear, I'm sorry to bother you at work, but there's been some commotion at your house? What kind of commotion? Elara's been there all day, and she's had several visitors. Her parents came by around noon and stayed for about an hour. There was quite a bit of shouting. Then that young man from the restaurant showed up. Tristan. Of course he did. Are they still there? The young man left about an hour ago. He looked rather upset. Elara's car is still in the driveway, but I haven't seen her come outside. I thanked Mrs. Greeley and tried to decide what to do. I could go home and have the confrontation Elara wanted, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I needed more time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how I wanted this to play out. Instead, I called a locksmith. I need the locks changed on my house, I said. Today, if possible. We can have someone there in 2 hours, cash or credit. Cash. I gave him the address and arranged to meet him there at 6 o'clock. That would give Elara time to leave, if she was smart. If she wasn't, well, that would make things interesting. At 6, I pulled into my driveway behind the locksmith's van. Elara's car was gone. The house looked empty and somehow smaller than I remembered, like it had deflated in my absence. The locksmith was efficient and professional. New locks on the front door, back door, and garage. New keys, new codes, new security. By 7 o'clock, Elara no longer had access to the house we'd shared for 3 years. I ordered pizza and ate it standing in the kitchen, looking around at the space that was now entirely mine. It should have felt liberating, but mostly it just felt hollow. All the furniture, all the decorations, all the little touches that had made this place feel like home had been chosen together. Now they just looked like props in a play that had closed unexpectedly. My phone, which I'd turned back on, showed 17 missed calls and 12 text messages, all from unknown numbers. Elara, trying to reach me from different phones. I deleted them without reading them. At 8 o'clock, headlights swept across the living room window, Elara's car in the driveway. I watched from the window as she got out and walked to the front door. She tried her key, then tried it again. I could see her face in the porch light, confusion giving way to understanding. She knocked. Drake? Drake, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. I stayed where I was. Drake, please, I can explain everything. It's not what you think. The knocking got louder, more insistent. This is ridiculous. This is my house too. Actually, it wasn't. The house was in my name only. We'd done it that way for tax reasons when we'd bought it, back when we trusted each other completely, back when the idea of needing legal protection from each other would have seemed absurd. After 20 minutes, she gave up and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear down the street and felt something that might have been satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. This isn't over. I texted back, yes, it is. But I was wrong about that. It was just beginning. Tuesday morning brought a new wrinkle. Elara was waiting for me in the marina parking lot when I arrived for work. She was sitting in her car, and from the look of things, she'd been there for a while. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she'd tried to get into the house the night before. I parked my truck and got out, ignoring her as I walked toward the workshop. She followed. Drake, stop, please. I kept walking. I left him. That made me pause. I turned around to look at her. She looked terrible, like she'd been crying for hours. You left him? Last night, after I couldn't get into the house, I told Tristan it was over. Congratulations. You want a medal? I want to come home. Home? I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. You mean the house where you've been lying to me for 3 months? The bed where you've been sleeping next to me while you were thinking about him? That home? It was a mistake, Drake. A horrible, stupid mistake. Which part? The affair or getting caught? She flinched like I'd slapped her. The affair. All of it. I don't know what I was thinking. I do. You were thinking you could have both. The stable husband with the steady income and the exciting boyfriend with the fancy car. You were thinking you were smart enough to keep me from finding out. That's not true. Isn't it? 3 months, Elara. 3 months of lies. 3 months of coming home to me after being with him. 3 months of pretending to love me while you were planning your next rendezvous. Mick had arrived and was watching our conversation from a respectful distance. A few of the other marina workers were starting to gather, pretending to work on their boats while obviously listening to every word. Can we please do this somewhere private? Elara asked. Why? You didn't mind having your affair in public. Janet Morrison at the Meridian says hi, by the way. So does everyone else who saw you two together. Her face went pale. People are talking? People are always talking, Elara. You just never cared before because it wasn't about you. I can fix this. We can fix this. No, I said. We can't. I walked into the workshop, leaving her standing in the parking lot. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car for another hour before finally driving away. Mick came over with coffee and a concerned expression. You okay, boss? I'm fine. You sure? Because that was pretty brutal. She had it coming. Maybe, but you might want to be careful. Hell hath no fury and all that. He was right, but I was past caring about Elara's fury. I was more interested in my own. Around noon, I got a call from Patricia, Elara's mother. Drake, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. Not at all. Robert and I have been talking since yesterday, and we want you to know that we're appalled by Elara's behavior. Absolutely appalled. I appreciate that. We raised her better than this. I don't know what's gotten into her. Sometimes people change. Yes. Well, we want you to know that whatever happens between you two, we still consider you family. You've always been a good husband to her, and she's thrown it away for some boy. The contempt in her voice when she said boy was unmistakable. We're cutting off her access to the trust fund, she continued. Robert thinks she needs to face the consequences of her actions without our financial support. This was news to me. I'd known Elara had some family money, but I'd never asked for details. We'd never needed it. How much are we talking about? $5,000 a month. She's been getting it since she turned 25. We thought it would help her feel secure, but apparently it just made her feel entitled. $5,000 a month. $60,000 a year. For 7 years. Money I'd never known about. Money she'd never mentioned. Money she'd been spending on. God knew what, while I'd been working 60-hour weeks to build our future. Does she know? Robert's calling her this afternoon. I wanted to talk to you first, to let you know that we're on your side in this. After she hung up, I sat in my office doing math. $60,000 a year for 7 years was over $400,000. Money that could have paid off our mortgage, expanded the business, set us up for retirement. Money she'd kept secret while I'd been worrying about every expense, every investment, every financial decision. The betrayal kept getting deeper. That afternoon, I decided to pay Tristan Vale a visit. His office was in one of those glass towers downtown, all marble and chrome and the kind of aggressive modern art that's supposed to impress clients. The directory in the lobby listed him as a senior sales associate for TechFlow Solutions. which sounded impressive until you realized it probably meant he made cold calls all day. I took the elevator to the 15th floor and walked up to the reception desk. "I'm here to see Tristan Vale. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me. Tell him Drake Torrin is here." The receptionist made a phone call, spoke quietly for a moment, then looked up at me with a curious expression. "He'll be right out." Tristan appeared a few minutes later, looking exactly like his Instagram photos, but somehow smaller in person. He was wearing an expensive suit and a nervous smile. "Drake," he said, extending his hand, "I've heard a lot about you." I didn't shake his hand. "I bet you have. Listen, maybe we should talk somewhere private." He led me to a small conference room with a view of the harbor. Through the windows I could see the marina where I worked, the boats I repaired, the life I'd built with my own hands. "I want you to know," Tristan said, closing the door behind us, "that I never intended for things to go as far as they did." "How far did you intend them to go?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It just happened. These things sometimes just happen." "No, they don't. People make choices. You chose to pursue a married woman. She chose to lie to her husband. Nothing just happened." "You're right. I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" "Both, I guess." At least he was honest about that. "How long have you known she was married?" "From the beginning. She told me the first day we met." "And that didn't stop you?" "She said you two were having problems, that you were growing apart." "Did she mention that we were planning a trip to Hawaii for our anniversary? Or that I'd been working extra hours to save money for a house renovation she wanted?" He looked genuinely surprised. "No, she made it sound like the marriage was basically over." "The marriage was fine until you came along." "Look, Drake, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Elara's an adult. She made her own choices." "Yes, she did. And now she's going to live with the consequences." I stood up to leave, then turned back. "One more thing. Stay away from her." "What?" "You heard me. Stay away from Elara. Don't call her, don't text her, don't accidentally run into her. Find someone else to play with." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm giving you advice. Good advice. Take it." I left him there in his conference room, looking out at the harbor and probably wondering what he'd gotten himself into. On the way back to the marina, I made another stop. Elara's office. The building was familiar territory by now. I'd been here for Christmas parties and company picnics, had met most of her co-workers at one time or another. The security guard in the lobby recognized me and waved me through without asking for ID. Elara's floor was busy with the usual afternoon activity. I walked through the maze of cubicles toward her office, nodding to people I recognized, ignoring the curious looks and whispered conversations that followed in my wake. Marina Chen was at her desk, typing furiously at her computer. She looked up as I approached, her expression shifting from surprise to guilt in about half a second. "Drake, what are you doing here?" "Looking for my wife. Have you seen her?" She's in a meeting." "With who?" "I'm not sure. Some client thing." Marina was a terrible liar. She kept glancing toward the break room, where I could see Elara through the glass walls, talking on her phone with animated gestures. "That client thing looks a lot like a personal phone call," I said. "Drake, maybe you should—" "Maybe I should what? Pretend I don't know that you've been covering for her affair? Pretend I don't know that you've been her alibi for 3 months?" Marina's face went red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Tell me, Marina. What did she pay you? Or did you do it for free, just for the excitement of helping your friend cheat on her husband?" Other people were starting to notice the conversation. Heads were turning. Conversations were stopping. The office was getting very quiet. "I think you should leave," Marina said. "I think you should mind your own business. But it's a little late for that, isn't it?" I walked toward the break room, leaving Marina at her desk, looking like she wanted to disappear. Elara saw me coming and quickly ended her phone call. Drake, what are you doing here? Thought I'd stop by and meet your co-workers, the ones who helped you lie to me. Keep your voice down. Why? Worried about what people will think? The break room had glass walls on 3 sides. Everyone on the floor could see us, and most of them were watching with the kind of fascination people reserve for traffic accidents and reality television. This is my workplace, Elara hissed. You can't just come in here and what? Tell the truth? Explain to your colleagues why you've been working so much overtime lately? Please, Drake, not here. Where then? Our house? Oh wait, you can't get into our house anymore. That's my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? The house is in my name, Elara, just mine. We did it for tax reasons, remember? Back when we trusted each other. She was staring at me like I'd just told her the earth was flat. You can't just lock me out of my own home. I can, and I did, just like you locked me out of my own marriage. I walked away, leaving her standing in the break room with half her office watching through the glass walls. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up behind me, dozens of people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. Just before they closed, I saw Elara rushing toward me, but she was too late. Going down. The war escalated over the next week. Elara hired a lawyer and filed papers demanding access to the house. I hired my own lawyer and filed a response explaining why she could find somewhere else to live. She tried to get her parents to intervene. They told her she'd made her bed and could lie in it. She showed up at the marina twice more, each time more desperate and angry than before. Meanwhile, I was methodically dismantling the life we'd shared. I canceled the joint credit cards, transferred the utilities into my name only, and changed the emergency contacts on all my accounts. I even canceled our shared Netflix subscription, which felt petty but satisfying. The coup de grace came when I found out about the money. Patricia had mentioned the trust fund, but further investigation revealed that Elara had been hiding more than just her monthly allowance. She had a savings account I'd never known about, containing nearly $200,000. Money that had been accumulating for years while I'd been worrying about mortgage payments and business expenses. But here's the thing about joint finances. Sometimes what's hidden can be found, and what's found can be frozen. My lawyer was very good at his job. By Friday, Elara was staying at a hotel and her secret account was tied up in legal proceedings. She'd gone from having a husband, a lover, family support, and financial security to having none of the above in the span of a week. That's when she made her final play. I was at the marina, working late on a particularly stubborn engine, when she showed up with Tristan in tow. They looked like they'd been arguing. Her face was flushed, and his jaw was set in a way that suggested barely controlled anger. "We need to talk," she announced. "We've talked. You lied, I found out, it's over. What else is there to discuss?" "This has gone far enough, Drake. You've made your point." "Have I? What point is that?" "That you're angry, that you feel betrayed, I get it. But this scorched earth approach isn't helping anyone." Tristan stepped forward. "Look, man, I know you're upset, but taking it out on Elara isn't going to fix anything." I looked at him for a long moment. "I'm sorry. Who are you again?" "You know who I am." "No, I mean, what are you doing here? This is a conversation between a husband and wife. You're just the guy she was having an affair with." "It's more complicated than that." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty simple. You wanted to sleep with a married woman, she wanted to cheat on her husband, and now you're both dealing with the consequences." Elara stepped between us. "Tristan, maybe you should wait in the car." "No," he said. "I'm tired of hiding. We're together now, Drake. Elara and I are together, and we're not going to let you intimidate us." "Together?" I laughed. You mean like how she was together with me while she was sneaking around with you? That's different. How? Because she loves me. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I looked at Elara, who was staring at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. Is that true, Elara? Do you love him? She looked up, and for a moment I saw something in her face that might have been the truth. Yes. More than you loved me. I never stopped loving you, Drake. But yes, what I feel for Tristan is different, stronger. Then why are you here? Because I want us to end this like adults. I want to work out a fair settlement and move on with our lives. A fair settlement. You mean you want half of everything I've worked for so you can start a new life with your boyfriend? It's not about the money. It's always about the money, Elara. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have hidden yours from me for 7 years. Tristan looked confused. What money? Elara shot me a warning look, but I was past caring about her secrets. She didn't tell you about the trust fund? The $5,000 a month she's been getting from Mommy and Daddy? Or the $200,000 in her private savings account? Now Tristan was staring at Elara with the same expression I'd probably had when I'd found out about him. You told me you didn't have any money. You said that's why we couldn't get a place together right away. It's complicated, she said. No, it's not, I said. She lied to you the same way she lied to me. That's what she does. The argument that followed was spectacular. Tristan accused Elara of using him. Elara accused me of sabotaging her relationship. I accused both of them of being selfish, dishonest people who deserved each other. It ended with Tristan storming off, leaving Elara standing in my workshop, looking lost and defeated. Are you happy now? She asked. Getting there. You've destroyed everything. My relationship, my family, my job. Your job? Word got around the office about what you did last week. HR called me in for a meeting about maintaining professional standards. I'm on probation. I felt a flicker of something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly. You destroyed those things yourself, Elara. I just made sure people knew about it. So what now? You've won. You've taken everything away from me. What's your endgame here? I thought about it for a moment. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? An apology that would never come or wouldn't matter if it did? I want you to understand, I said finally. Understand what? What it feels like to have someone you trust tear your life apart. What it feels like to discover that the person you love most in the world has been lying to you every single day. What it feels like to realize that your entire relationship was built on deception. I do understand. I feel terrible about what I did to you. No, you feel terrible about getting caught. There's a difference. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face in a way that once would have broken my heart. Now it just looked like another performance. I loved you, Drake. I really did. Maybe. But you loved yourself more. She left after that, driving away in her car that would probably be repossessed within a month once the lawyers finished sorting through our finances. I watched her taillights disappear into the darkness and felt something I hadn't expected. Emptiness. The revenge was complete. Elara had lost her marriage, her lover, her family's support, her financial security, and her professional reputation. She was facing the prospect of starting over at 32 with nothing but the clothes in her suitcase and whatever money she could scrape together for a security deposit on a studio apartment. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. Mick found me an hour later, still sitting in the workshop, staring at the engine I'd been working on. Heard there was some excitement here tonight, he said. You could say that. How do you feel? Empty. That's normal. Revenge is like that. It fills you up while you're planning it. But once it's done, there's nothing left. Voice of experience? My ex-wife. I spent 2 years making her life miserable after she left me. Felt great at the time. Looking back, I wish I'd just let it go and moved on. Any regrets? About Elara? No. She made her choices. But maybe it's time to start thinking about what comes next. He was right, but I wasn't ready to think about the future yet. I was still processing the present, still coming to terms with the fact that the woman I'd loved for 8 years had never really existed. The real Elara was someone who could lie without conscience, cheat without remorse, and blame everyone but herself when the consequences caught up with her. I locked up the workshop and drove home to my empty house, where I ate a frozen dinner and watched television until I fell asleep on the couch. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows and scattered leaves across the yard that Elara and I had planted together in happier times. Overtime was canceled. The project was finished. The marriage was over. And somehow, despite everything, I was still standing. 6 months later, I was rebuilding a boat engine when Mrs. Greeley appeared at the workshop entrance with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. "How are you doing, dear?" "Better," I said, and meant it. The divorce had been finalized the month before. Elara had gotten a small settlement, enough to get back on her feet, but nothing close to the half of everything she'd originally demanded. The hidden money had worked against her in court. Judges don't like it when people lie about their assets. She'd moved to another city, taken a job with a different company, and as far as I knew, was trying to rebuild her life. Tristan had moved on to someone else, probably someone who didn't come with quite so much baggage. "I have some news," Mrs. Greeley said, settling into the chair I kept by my workbench. "Janet Morrison's niece is moving to town. She's a teacher, recently divorced, very nice girl. I thought perhaps you might like to meet her." I smiled. Mrs. Greeley had been trying to set me up with various relatives and acquaintances for months. Her heart was in the right place, but I wasn't ready yet. "Maybe in a while," I said. "Of course, dear. No rush." After she left, I went back to work on the engine, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of disassembly and repair. The marina was busy with the spring rush, boat owners preparing for another season on the water. Business was good. Life was simple. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Elara, but it was just Mick asking about parts for a project. I realized I'd been hoping it was her, and that surprised me. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted to know she was okay. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and the betrayal and the months of revenge, I didn't actually want her to be miserable forever. Maybe that meant I was healing. Or maybe it just meant I was tired of being angry. Either way, it felt like progress. I finished rebuilding the engine as the sun set over the harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me why I'd chosen this life, this place, this work. Tomorrow, there would be other engines to fix, other problems to solve, other challenges to meet. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. The overtime was canceled, the project was complete, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to whatever came next.